Welcome to Psycast. If you've been feeling the quiet pressure to always do more, even when you're exhausted, this might be the conversation you didn't know you needed. What if the reason you're stuck isn't because you're not trying hard enough, but because you've never learned how to truly rest? I used to think rest was something you earned, a reward maybe, the dessert after a long day of work. But what if rest isn't the reward? What if it's the doorway? The place where clarity begins. The strange truth is, the more I've studied people who endure, who lead, who create lives that are both peaceful and powerful, the more I've seen this quiet pattern. They rest differently. They don't chase rest after burnout. They build from it. And maybe no one told you this before, but exhaustion is not a badge of honor. It's a signpost, a red flag waving quietly in your nervous system saying, "This isn't the way." There's a line by Epictetus that changed the way I saw my own effort. He said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." And I never understood it at first. Why would I want to be seen as foolish? But I get it now. Sometimes choosing rest, choosing not to keep up, makes you look lazy in a world addicted to speed. Sometimes doing less looks like losing to people who can't imagine another way. But it's not losing. It's leaving the race you never belonged to in the first place. The pressure to always be doing is like background noise. You don't even notice it anymore. Wake up, check your phone, start the mental to-do list before your feet touch the floor. You measure your days by output. Did I do enough? Did I keep up? Did I fall behind? But what if that question, did I fall behind, is the wrong one entirely? No one ever teaches us how to rest. Not really. We're told to take breaks, to breathe, to schedule self-care. But those are still things to do, still boxes to check. That's not rest. That's just another costume productivity wears. Real rest is different. It's not what you do. It's what you stop doing. It's the art of allowing, of trusting that something important still happens when you pause, that letting go isn't the same as giving up, that stopping might be the most strategic thing you ever do. Because here's the paradox. When you build your life from rest, you don't just feel better, you do better. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're finally aligned with your own rhythm. And maybe no one told you this before, but rest is not just a physical thing. It's emotional, psychological, existential. It's the courage to stop over-explaining yourself, to stop holding every room together, to stop solving problems that don't belong to you. It's the willingness to be misunderstood, so you can finally be whole. Let me tell you something I once heard that stayed with me. You can't pour from an empty cup. It sounds obvious until you realize how many of us try to live our entire lives from emptiness. Not just our mornings or our work days, but our entire sense of self. We give and give, not because we have so much to offer, but because we're afraid of what it means to stop. We're afraid that stillness will reveal something we've been trying not to feel. So we move, we produce, we overfunction, because movement distracts us from the ache. But rest, true rest, requires a deeper kind of bravery, the kind that lets silence speak, the kind that allows the questions we've been avoiding to rise to the surface. Like, what if I don't want this life I've been working so hard to maintain? Or, what if I've never actually felt safe enough to stop? There's a reason Epictetus taught that freedom is found not in having everything, but in needing less. To need less, not in a way that shrinks your life, but in a way that expands your peace. In a world that screams for more, he pointed us back to the power of subtraction, of stillness, of letting go. He wasn't romanticizing laziness. He was describing a strength most people never cultivate, the strength of inner calm, the discipline of restraint, the wisdom to know when doing more is actually costing you more than it's giving. And that kind of strength, it doesn't show up on your calendar. It doesn't win you awards, but it builds something far better, a life that doesn't collapse when things get quiet. We spend so much of our lives reacting to pressure, to comparison, to fear. But rest isn't a reaction. It's a choice, a deliberate shift from surviving to being. There's something deeply powerful about refusing to be rushed, about no longer letting urgency run your life. Because most of the time, the urgency isn't even yours. It's inherited, conditioned, projected. Think about it. Who told you that your worth is tied to your output? That slowing down means falling behind? That if you're not always pushing, you're failing? That voice, wherever it came from, isn't your truth. It's just noise. Noise that has stolen too many quiet moments that could have healed you. Moments where you might have remembered that you are not a machine. You are not a product. You are not your performance. You're a person, a soul, a story still unfolding. And every story needs a pause. Somewhere along the way, we began to equate stillness with stagnation, as if slowing down meant losing momentum, as if rest was a detour instead of part of the road. But the most grounded people I know, the ones who move through life with clarity and quiet confidence, have one thing in common. They've made peace with rest. They've stopped trying to prove something with every action. And because of that, their actions actually mean more. I remember reading something from Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." That space, that breath, that pause, that moment where you don't react out of habit, that's rest. And it's where your life begins to change. We think the hard part is slowing down, but the real challenge is facing what we feel when we do. The loneliness, the grief, the doubt, the discomfort of not being on all the time. We fill our calendars because we're terrified of what might surface in the space between appointments. But growth never happens in the noise. It happens in the margins, in the moments no one applauds. And maybe this is why so many of us struggle with rest, because we've attached our identity to our usefulness. We don't know who we are without our busyness. We've worn effort like armor. And underneath it, there's a fear that if we stop doing, we'll stop mattering. But that's the lie. And it's a costly one. Because the truth is, you matter most when you're present, not when you're performing. You matter when you're whole, not when you're impressive. And ironically, that's what makes your presence so powerful. Not your hustle, but your stillness, your groundedness, your capacity to show up without needing to outshine anyone else. This is what rest gives you. It returns you to yourself. And I don't mean sleep or naps or days off, though those matter too. I mean the deeper rest, the kind where your nervous system isn't bracing, the kind where your worth isn't being calculated, the kind where your joy isn't conditional, the rest that comes when you stop negotiating your value with the world. You can feel it, can't you? The craving for that kind of peace, the ache beneath the productivity, the quiet desire to come home, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. And here's the strange part. Once you allow yourself to rest in that way, you begin to move differently. Not slower, not smaller, but cleaner, clearer. You stop leaking energy. You stop seeking validation in every outcome. You start acting from alignment, not anxiety. And that's when your actions start to work. Because they're rooted. Because they come from truth, not pressure. There's something sacred about unlearning the urgency that was never yours to begin with. It's not dramatic. It doesn't come with fanfare. But it feels like exhaling for the first time in years. Like stepping out of someone else's rhythm and rediscovering your own. You begin to notice things you couldn't see before. The way your body softens when you stop rushing. The way your thoughts slow down when you don't try to outthink your exhaustion. The way your spirit starts to speak when you finally get quiet enough to hear it. And yes, it can feel disorienting at first, like losing your grip, like falling behind. But the only thing you're falling behind is a race you never chose to run. Let me paint you a picture. There's a woman who wakes up early every morning, not because she wants to, but because she feels she has to. She checks her phone before her feet touch the ground. She replies to emails with one hand while brushing her teeth with the other. She skips breakfast, not out of choice, but because time feels like a thief, always taking more than it gives. She lives in a loop of tasks and timelines. And by evening, she's exhausted, but unable to rest. Because the pressure didn't end with her workday. It lives in her bones now. It hums beneath her skin. Even rest feels like another item she's supposed to do right. She doesn't know this yet, but she's burning through her life without ever feeling it. And then there's someone else. Someone who wakes up and takes a breath. Not a shallow one, a real one. They don't reach for their phone first. They move slowly, not because they're lazy, but because they know speed doesn't equal success. They have boundaries that protect their time and their energy. They rest not just on weekends, but in the middle of chaos. They've learned that saying no is an act of self-respect. That rest isn't about avoiding life. It's about having the capacity to live it. And what's ironic is this: that second person. They often achieve more, not because they work more hours, but because their work is sharper, clearer, more intentional. They're not dragging resentment or fatigue into every decision. They're not proving their worth with productivity. They're moving from a place of clarity, not crisis. It reminds me of something Carl Jung once said: "Hurry is not of the devil, it is the devil." He wasn't condemning effort. He was warning us. When we live in constant urgency, we lose access to our inner life. We react instead of reflect. We survive instead of choosing. And what happens when a life is lived in survival mode too long? It becomes narrow, flat, exhausted, even if it looks successful from the outside. But a rested life, a truly rested life, doesn't shrink. It expands. It deepens. Because when you're no longer performing exhaustion as proof of your dedication, you begin to tap into something richer: wisdom. You say no when it's needed. You pause before reacting. You make room for joy that isn't scheduled or deserved. It just is. And over time, you realize, I am still worthy, even when I am still. That realization changes everything, because it breaks the spell. The one that said, if I stop, I'll fall apart. But the truth is, if you never stop, you never come together. This is the quiet revolution of rest. It gives you back to yourself. I think we often underestimate just how deeply rest connects to self-trust. To be still, to not be doing, it means trusting that the world won't collapse without you, that you don't need to micromanage every outcome, that your worth isn't hanging by the thread of constant usefulness. It's hard, especially if you grew up around chaos, if your nervous system learned that safety came from control, if being busy meant being needed, and being needed meant being loved. But here's the truth. No one said out loud when you were younger, love that depends on performance is not love. It's dependency. It's fear. And when you stop performing, what you're really doing is choosing to be loved for who you are, not for what you do. Rest, then, becomes the bravest kind of reclamation, not just of your time, but of your dignity. And from this place of rest, something wild happens. You begin to access a deeper kind of intelligence, a clarity that can't be rushed. You stop solving problems that aren't yours. You stop chasing people who drain you. You stop trying to outrun your own shadow, because you finally realize you are enough, not because of what you produce, but because of who you are when you're not trying so hard. James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, said something that echoes this. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And if your system is built on exhaustion, on running faster just to stay in place, you'll never feel the satisfaction you're chasing. But if your system includes rest, intentional, non-negotiable, restorative rest, then everything changes. You don't just do more, you become more, not by force, but by flow. And this, I think, is where Epictetus becomes so relevant again, because what he taught wasn't just philosophy, it was resilience, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that whispers, you're allowed to live differently. You're allowed to rest, to be slow, to be present, and still be powerful. Power that comes from peace is sustainable. Power that comes from fear never lasts. And this is what no one tells you in the beginning. Rest is not the enemy of success. It is the soil from which real success grows. Not just the kind that looks good on paper, but the kind that feels good in your soul. You begin to make decisions not from urgency, but from wisdom. You stop reacting to pressure and start responding to purpose. You begin to live by design, not by default. And maybe most importantly, you finally create space for joy that isn't followed by guilt, laughter that doesn't need to be earned, quiet moments that aren't interruptions. But the point, because rest is not an absence of life. It is where life returns. So here's what I want to leave you with. If you've been feeling behind, if you've been measuring your days by how much you got done, instead of how deeply you lived, if you've started to believe that your value lies somewhere on the other side of effort, I want you to pause, just for a moment, and ask yourself this. Who taught you that rest is weakness? Who made you believe that if you stop moving, you'll fall apart? And what if the opposite is true? What if rest isn't the thing that breaks you, but the thing that brings you back? There is no trophy for burnout, no gold star for anxiety, no lasting joy in becoming everything to everyone except yourself. But there is healing in slowing down. There is beauty in breathing again. There is strength in saying, I don't need to do more to be more. That's not quitting. That's wisdom. That's the kind of strength that can hold a life, not just a schedule. You're allowed to leave the race. You're allowed to be misunderstood. You're allowed to choose peace, even when the world calls it laziness. Because deep down, peace is not laziness. It's presence. And presence is the most powerful thing you can bring into any room. You begin to see the people around you differently, too. You listen more, you hurry less, you start noticing the sky again. The smell of your coffee, the way your own breath softens when you remember you're not late. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. You win, not by doing more than everyone else, but by needing less, wanting less noise, choosing less drama, chasing fewer things that never fed you in the first place. And in that quiet, something sacred grows. Stillness is not stagnation. It is strength, refined. It's what lets you walk away from things that aren't aligned. It's what helps you stay grounded when everyone else is spinning. It's what allows you to love without clinging, to lead without forcing, to create without exhausting. This is the art of resting, not as escape, but as mastery. A mastery that Epictetus understood, that Viktor Frankl practiced, that every soul eventually learns if they are brave enough to stop. So rest. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know this. Doing less doesn't make you less. Sometimes it makes you free.